All right, guys, welcome back. I'm pretty excited about this video. Before we start, let's recap everything from the last video. So in the last video, I announced two products. One was the direct wire harness for 2005 to 2007 LX Dodge cars. So the Charger, Magnum, and 300. And basically this kit allows you to direct wire the paddles down to the shifter. Now the only requirements is your car has to have factory auto stick. If you have a factory auto stick car, you can use this harness to make your paddles function. Second option is the modified steering wheel buttons. This has to be used with the Z Automotive transformer. The transformer has a function called steering wheel shift, and you can use the volume up and down buttons on the steering wheel to shift. So what we do is we take that button assembly. I have wires coming off the circuit board. Those tie into the paddles. So anytime you're in auto stick, the paddles and the buttons will function as shifting. And then when you're in drive, the paddles and the buttons will just be volume. That's the more expensive route because you have to buy the transformer also, but you get all the perks of having the transformer, like adjusting shift pressures and all that stuff. So it's still a good option. You get a lot more stuff like burnout mode, line lock, all that fun stuff. Now the only requirements for that is your car has to have factory steering wheel controls. If your car has factory steering wheel controls, you can use the button assembly with the transformer. Now, if you recall, in the last video, I said this. For the 08 to 10, there's no direct wire option that you can do. I've tried it. I've spent weeks trying to figure it out, see if it's possible. I even bought 05 to 07 steering column, cruise control, all that stuff. Tried to use it in my 08. It does not work. Well, turns out I was wrong. When I initially started all this, that was my goal, was to figure out a way to direct wire paddle shifters on an 08 to 10. In 2008, Dodge and Chrysler cars have their cruise control mounted on the steering wheel, whereas 05 to 7, it was on the column. So that's what makes it easy to direct wire paddles on 05 to 7s, because the clock spring actually has two open pins on the clock spring. And what you can do is run your paddle signal wires through the clock spring down to the shifter. Well, in 08, when the cruise control went to the steering wheel, no more open pins on the clock spring. So after some figuring with some wires and stuff, you can't use any of the wires that are already there. Everything operates on the CAN system, so you can't just repurpose wires. So then my second thought was, what if I could take a 2005 to 2007 steering column with the cruise on the left and the 2005 to 2007 clock spring and put it in an 08 to 10, would it work? My first attempt at this did not work. The cruise would not power on, and I had the ABS light, it would not go out. And I fiddled with it for a while, ended up just giving up and thought it just couldn't be done just because of the changes in 2008 with the CAN system and the clusters are different. Power control module in the front, 08 to 10 is a total power control unit, whereas 05 to 7 it was two separate parts. You had a front control module and then the power control module. So I thought with all the changes in 2008, it just wasn't possible. Until Mopar Wagon on Instagram messaged me and said, hey guy, I have a 2008 Magnum Pursuit and I have the cruise on the left. And I'm thinking, well, that's weird. And he's like, I converted to floor shifter, because Pursuit cars had the shifter on the column. And he said he used a 2008 300C shifter. Well, something also that changed in 2008 was the shifters, specifically the auto stick function. On 05 to 7, it's a 3-wire system. You have your signal for shift up, your signal for shift down, and a ground. On 08 to 10s, it changed, it's 2 wires. You have a signal wire and a ground wire. The upshift and downshift signals operate on resistance. So therefore the signals for upshift and downshift can both be sent through the single wire. So I thought, okay, he's got the older style column with the cruise control on the left, but he has the 08 to 10 shifter. Essentially what I tried to replicate in my car personally. So I thought, okay, I got to try this again. So I got some more parts and we're going to do it. So let me show you what parts are going to be required, because it's not just buy my harness, wire your paddle shifters in. You're going to have to buy some used parts to convert your car to the older style column and clock spring setup. All right, first part required is the column assembly. This has the cruise on the left here. Now inside this column, it houses a bunch of things. First of all, your turn signal switch. This switch should be the same part for all the LX Dodges, 05 to 10. So if you bought one of these missing your turn signal switch, you should be able to use the one out of your 08 and put in here. Second thing is steering angle sensor. Now, I assume most of you guys have Hemi cars. I am 99% sure all Hemi cars have the steering angle sensor because it contributes to your stability control. And these also should be able to use from any year. So just like the Switch, if you buy one of these without your steering angle sensor, you can put your 08 to 10 one in the 05 to 7 housing. This is actually mine from my car, and my car's an 08. Obviously, your turn signal switch is in here. Then on the back, you have your steering control module. And that basically is what all the signals run into. And then that outputs that to the harness on the steering column. So this is the first part you need. eBay, all day. You can find these. Better yet, junkyard. You can pull this whole assembly. All you need is a long T30 Torx. And you come up through here and loosen that. The screw will stay inside. And then the whole thing will pop off. Now, to go along with that, you need the 05 to 07 clock spring. And the way you can tell is it has these two pins right here, whereas the 08 to 10s do not have that. At least the 08 to 10 civilian cars. The Pursuits have this clock spring also. Now, you can find these with this clock spring still on it. The thing you got to worry about is if you buy these parts used, is you don't know how many times this is turned off the car. You don't want this to be offset in any direction because there's a ribbon in there. And as you turn the steering wheel, that ribbon moves. And if you have this thing turned too many times, put it in your car centered, you could break that ribbon. So, junkyard, if you pull the steering wheel off and you pull this whole thing as an assembly, just make sure it doesn't turn, and then you're good. But if you say you buy one of these off of eBay and it has the clock spring on it, you don't know how many times that's turned or not turned. So just be aware. They can be found for like $35 shipped off eBay. So not bad. And the last piece is an 05 to 07 rear steering wheel cover. And that's because on your 08 to 10, the cruise control is here. And this housing has this bump out for the turn signal switch. Now, you could obviously get away with not using this. Just delete the cruise control and you would just have this bump out here. So if you don't care about that, you could definitely just reuse your cover and just have this open spot here with this bump out. Totally up to you. And then obviously you're going to need to mount your paddle shifters to the steering wheel. And again, I got 2 videos showing the process on how to do that. The first time I mounted them out here and I didn't like the placement, so I did it a second time and mounted them in here. So check those videos out. Make sure you're up to that task. And once you get those paddles on, you can start the installation of my new harness for 08 to 10s. All right, so you got your paddles mounted to your steering wheel. You got the 05 to 07 clock spring. You have the 05 to 07 column with all the stuff inside. And you got your steering wheel back cover. Then you get my harness. And no, this is not the same harness as the 05 to 7s. There are differences. This harness, basically the same. This is much different. Inside these wires here are actual resistors to replicate the autostick resistance at your shifter. This is totally separate than the 05 to 2007 harnesses. This is specific to 08 to 10s if you want to convert and direct wire your paddles. And again, huge shout out to Mopar Wagon on Instagram. Without him, I don't know if I'd be doing this because I gave up. And I shouldn't have. And he's been awesome at talking through this with me and figuring things out and all that. So shout out to him. Go follow him on Instagram. And also, now I'm working on 08 to 10 harnesses for Pursuits that have the column shifter. So if you have a Pursuit and you have the column shifter, keep an eye out. I'm working on harnesses for those also. So with that being said, let's get to the install. Okay, first thing we need to do is remove this cover. Now, regardless of whether you're keeping your 08 to 10 cover or replacing it, it still needs removed so we can run the harness on the backside. Then you just got these 4 screws. Now, once you have those screws removed, you need to flip it over. And you have 2 more screws here for the cruise. Remove those. And then 1 more holding the cruise to the steering wheel. Unplug your cruise control, and the cruise pops out. Then your cover comes off, and we can flip it over and run our harness. So here we've got our harness, just like the 05 to 07 cars. We're going to stick the wires through here on the top side. We're going to hug that harness right in here, just like this. And basically what you need to look for is this heat shrink should be in the general area of where it needs to sit with the stock harness. Also, right here is where that clock spring pins are going to be exposed. So if you take your little connector, just make sure it reaches like that. So that's plenty. Now we can put our cover back on. Now also, just like the 2005 to 2007 install, there's two little nubs here on the steering wheel cover. Cut those off. It just gives more room for the harness to fit in there. And we'll slide that on. Make sure our wires are in this little cubby. Just like that. So those wires are right in there. Flip it over. Put our screws back in. Now, as far as connections in the steering wheel, on the harnesses you guys buy, there will be actual butt connectors here. On this example, I'm using these bullet connectors just because I already had them on my paddle shift wires. Because on the steering wheel switch option, there's bullet connectors on it, just so you can remove this from the steering wheel if you ever needed to. So that's the only difference it's going to be. You guys will have butt connectors, and you can hardwire that right into the steering wheel because this harness should never have to be removed. You can just unplug it from the clock spring and the wheel will pull off and the harness can stay in the steering wheel. You got a yellow and blue and two blacks. Yellow is going to be shift up. It can go to either of the shift up wires. Doesn't matter which one. And again, you guys will have butt connectors and you can just crimp it. The blue can go to any of the downshift wires. Like that. Then you'll have two blacks left over, and those can go to the remaining two wires from your paddle shifters. So here we go. Yellow and one black to your upshift, blue and one black to your downshift. Then I'll have zip ties that come with this so you can secure it to your factory harness up here. I'll do it after I get the wheel back on. You just don't want the wires hanging down here behind the airbag, and also you don't want them coming out the back side of the steering wheel here and rubbing on the steering column. But we're done with the wheel for now. Let's get to the car. Now, once you have your steering column all prepped, you got all your modules and stuff in here, your turn signal switch, cruise switch, steering angle sensor, and the steering control module. You can go ahead and install the clock spring on here so that you don't have to fool with it later. Paying special attention to these pins because they can bend pretty easily and not go in the slots on the steering control module down there. So very carefully insert that in there, and then you just have 3 screws and you can tighten it on. I like to keep this in here. If you buy a new one, that's how they come, so they can't turn. I like to leave it in there until I'm putting the steering wheel on. So we'll take this very carefully. And it's kind of just a feel thing. If you feel any resistance, stop. See, it just falls in there, and that's how it should go in. It should just fall. You shouldn't have to force this down. And we just take our screwdriver. Now, a little tip. If you're going to a pull apart or pick apart or your local junkyard or something and pulling this whole assembly, what you can do is after you pull the steering wheel off the car, loosen this screw just so that this can't turn. If you just leave this screw loosened past this hole, this can't turn and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, that's ready to go in the car. Now there is one thing I want to mention. There is going to be some wiring required on your part. Unfortunately, the 2005 to 2007 clock spring harness will not plug into your 08 to 10 steering wheel harness. See, there's 6 pins in there. It's because 3 of those are for the cruise. So this takes a much bigger connector. That will not plug in there. So the fix is 2 options. One, you can get to 2005 to 2007 steering wheel harness and replace this harness with that. It'll plug into both these buttons just like normal and have your horn button. That way this will plug right in. Option 2 is cut this off and then connect your 08 to 10 clock spring plug onto the 05 to 07 clock spring, which you can see I've already done once. That's why they're all cut. So that's the route I'm going, just because I don't want to source a steering wheel harness. I'm just going to cut this plug off, and splice that one on here, and I'll show you how to do it. So to get started, first thing I did is, if you have telescoping column, pull it all the way out. That'll help you get access to the 16-pin connector behind the steering column. Also, I backed 1 screw out of my clock spring just so it can't turn, just to save it for later, just in case. So you'll have to remove your column assembly, T30 under there, just like I showed you before. Loosen that, the whole thing will pop off. It may take a little effort because the clock spring snaps on to the steering shaft. So just pull evenly, top and bottom, and it'll snap off. We need to remove our lower dash panel. This pops off, there'll be a screw. Then there's a screw under here, and then this will pop off. Disconnect your trunk latch switch, connector on the back side. And then the last thing is to remove the center console here. So you just pry this trim ring up, it just snaps in. And then also this whole piece under here just snaps in. If you have lighted cup holders, there's a connector you need to undo when you pull this up. And you got the rest of the center console. There'll be 2 screws in each corner. And then inside, move this tray. You have 4 8mm. Loosen those. And then you'll have the main connector under here also. And I just like to slide it back, just so you can get access to the side of the shift assembly under there. All right, got my lower dash panel removed, steering column removed, center console slid back to access the shifter. And the last thing we need to take off is this knee plate, 4 10mm, and it pulls right off. Okay, I got that removed. Now this is the connector we're after. First thing you need to do is right back here, there's gonna be a zip tie, and that's connecting this outer clip to the harness. You need to cut that. Once you cut that, you can slide this outer case off. You just push this pin and it'll slide down, but it will not slide down until you cut that zip tie. All right, with the zip tie cut, like I said, just push here and this will slide down like that. And then next, on the back of this plug, there's 2 little tabs on either side down here at the bottom. What you need to do is take a little pocket screwdriver and come in here from the back and release those tabs, and it'll slide right out of this housing. Right here, you can see there's one of the tabs right there that you gotta push, and here's the other one right there. Real easy, just push those and it'll slide right out of there. Now, back here on the back, if this is the top, this is the way it came out, this is the top. You can see 3 open spots there on the left. Those are pins 5, 6, and 7. Our harness is going to go in 5 and 6. 5 being the one next to this green wire, 6 is the next one up, and 7 is the top one. So 5 and 6. You can see in our harness here, I have one marked yellow, and then it corresponds with the yellow wire, and then this one's going to be black. The black wire goes to pin 5. The yellow marked wire will go to pin 6. You can see right here on this one, there's the locking tab. And same thing right there, there's the locking tab. Those tabs are important the way you insert these into that plug. So when you insert those pins, those locking tabs need to be to this outside edge, facing this way. Not facing that way, or up this way. And when you insert them, you should hear them click and kind of give them a little tug to make sure they're secure in the housing there. Now, inserting those pins might become difficult due to the way those wires are pushed up from this outer shell. This shell will slide off of the connector here. You can see right there is a little tab. And if you just release this shell, this whole connector will slide out of this locking shell here. Okay, you can see that tab. I have it partially removed, and see how it just slides out like this. And then you have this piece left. That should give more room to get the pins in. I have the black wire in pin 5. Let's see if we can get this click to show up right there. Clicked in. There we go. Now we can slide that shell back on and slide it back up in the housing. Okay, I got my harness ran back here under the dash. I'm gonna slide this case back on the clip like that. And we can slide this right back up in here and it'll lock inside. Now we can put that other clip back on and then zip tie our harness back to that clip. Okay, we snap this back up like that. Then it's very important to put a zip tie back on here, securing this to the harness, just like it was from the factory. And I include one thick zip tie, and that's what that's made for, is to go right here around the harness, around this clip here. Okay, I got my zip tie on there, and I made sure you get the new wires that you just put in that clip also with the rest of the harness. Sometimes they like to sit up here, and you'll miss them when you go to put that zip tie in. But I got it on there, got all my wires and the new harness zip tied to the old harness. So we're good to go there. Now we can start running it under the dash here. Okay, you can see I got my harness run down here, down behind the dash panel there. And it goes behind here. And then I like to come right under this cubby hole behind this bracket and go on the inside of this bracket instead of running here. So right down around here, make sure it's up behind here, behind this panel here. Stick it through here to come out on this side of the bracket. You can pop this push pin out, run it underneath there, put that back in, and then here we are, ready to go. You can see I took my 2 taps and tapped them onto the yellow and black wire of this little 2-pin connector down here. Those are your auto stick. You can tell because they go up to this orange box, and that's the auto stick switch circuit board. So put your taps on there, and then yellow to yellow and black to black. And just like that, got them connected. Obviously, be careful with these wires. You don't want to pull them off the circuit board up here. So just make sure you have plenty of support when you go to plug these in, because it can be kind of tight. And then later what I'll do is zip tie it maybe here to this harness, and I'll zip tie it there, and then maybe a couple places up here just to tidy it up. So at this point, we can put our 05 to 2007 steering column on the car. And it should just slide in there like that. Now, like I said before, there's tabs on this clock spring that snap onto the steering shaft, so it'll take a little effort. Like that. And there we go. Okay, now we can tighten it up with our T30. Now, a little tip is what you're going to do is go ahead and tighten that screw up until you feel it get snug. Back it off just a little bit. And what you're going to notice is there's movement here. See this? And what you're going to want to do is pull this out, actually, so that you get a good contact with your steering angle sensor in here. You don't want it back. You want it forward, like that. Then you can tighten it all the way. All right, the wheel's on, and I got my paddle shifter harness plugged into the clock spring. Just a note, those little pins in there on the clock spring can bend very easily. So when you go to plug this harness in, make sure those pins are going into this plug and that they're not bending to the sides. Now, this connector does not snap into the clock spring. It just kind of tightly fits on the pins. So what we'll do is, once we finalize it, I'm just going to throw a zip tie right here, connecting the clock spring harness to the paddle shifter harness to try to keep that in place. I don't think it's going to go anywhere or slide out of there, but just for some reassurance, we'll tighten a zip tie right there to keep it there. Now, I told you about the clock spring harness versus 08 to 10 steering wheel harness issue. This is not going to plug into here. So, like I said, you have 2 options. You can get the 05 to 07 steering wheel harness and swap it into your steering wheel. Or you can cut this plug off and solder on your 08 to 10 clock spring harness plug, and then it'll plug in. For demonstration purposes for now, I'm just going to make some leads that connect this to this, just so we can do some testing and verify everything, and then I can get this video out. And then later I'll come in here and tidy that up. Just like all the harness, I'll zip tie it all up, zip tie that all up and everything. But as far as wire colors go, you can see white with red goes to white on the clock spring wire. White with green goes to the red clock spring wire. And then solid white goes to the black clock spring wire. So that's just how you'll match them up when you put your 08 to 10 clock spring connector on the 05 to 07 clock spring harness. But you can see I got some jumper wires made up so we can do some testing. All right, so let's power the car on. And everything looks good, no random odd things popping up. So we'll check volume first. Okay, volume works. Let's see if our pages work. Yep, pages work. Compass, yes. So we'll go back to pages here. And our up arrow works, down arrow works. Let's see, to a reset. There we go. There's a reset, and it resets. Okay, so all of our steering wheel buttons work. Now the next test we're gonna do is start the car up and make sure our cruise turns on. And another thing you can do is turn signals work. Yep, brights are turning on. Perfect. Wipers work. Perfect. So let's start it up. Now, since we messed with the steering angle sensor and column and stuff, you might have the ABS light and traction light because we need to reset the steering angle sensor. So you can turn the wheel all the way to the left, all the way to the right, back to center, turn the car off, turn it back on, and drive. And those lights should pop out. But let's see. Cruise control, power's on, cruise is on, so that's a plus. Turn that off. Now let's check our paddles. So at a stop, you can put the car in auto stick with the paddles. So let's put the car in drive. So we're in drive, so we should be able to push paddle up and it should kick it in auto stick. There we go, auto stick. Shift to second, yep. Shift down to first. First. Hold paddle to drive. There we go, back in drive. It works, everything works. Those lights should come off after driving for a few, recalibrating the steering angle sensor. And there we go. You got paddle shifters direct wired to your 08 to 10 shifter, and they work just like the factory auto stick. Initiate auto stick. There we go. You can shift up to second just because we're sitting still. Back down to first. Put it in drive. There we go. Perfect. Okay, let me get this all tidied up and we can take it for a drive just to make sure everything works right, like the cruise operates. We get the ESP BAS lights to go out. And once we do that, we put the interior back together. All right, we're in the car and the steering angle sensor reset worked. No more lights. So we're good to try the paddle shifters. We're in drive right now. Let's see here. So I should be able to stick this car in auto stick with just the paddle. And there we go, we're in auto stick. Shift to fifth right there. Let's see if we can shift down. Fourth, third, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So paddle shifters work. So one other thing I wanted to test is the cruise control, make sure that operates like it should. So we'll turn the cruise on. Cruise is on, and we'll go ahead and set it. The cruise is set. My foot's off the gas. It's holding speed just like it should. And we can accelerate by pushing up, decelerate by pushing down. And there we go, canceled it. So pretty sweet. Everything works like it should. Paddle shifters work. nice. I really like how it works like the factory autostick does. Let's give it a rip. Ooh, spinning. Obviously, some cars have auto upshift and auto stick, like this car does. With the transformer, I could change it to gear hold if I wanted to. Some cars came stock that way with gear hold and auto stick, but yeah, it works. And if I hold upshift, puts it back in drive. So pretty sweet. Okay, there it is. It works. Pretty sweet that I was able to get this to work. If you go back on the forums and try to find anybody who has ever done this in an 08 to 10, it's just not there. I've seen one guy ask about putting the 05 to 07 steering column in their 08 to 10 car, but the forum just died. The post just stopped. So I don't know if that guy ever tried it. But proof of concept, it works. Now 08 to 10 guys have an option to direct wire the paddles if you don't want to go the steering wheel button route with the transformer. So I'm super excited to offer that. And I think I just might keep it that way in my car because I really like the way it functions just like this factory auto stick, where you can control the auto stick with the paddles, don't have to touch a shifter at all. I think I like it. Obviously, I'm keeping the transformer in there also just because of all the cool features that it has. I would have one of those anyway, regardless of the paddle shifter stuff. But so there you go. 05 to 07, direct wire harness. That's all you need other than the paddles. 08 to 10, direct wire harness. You got to change the steering column with the cruise control and stuff. And if you don't want to do any of that wiring and want the most simple setup, the steering wheel buttons, you just have to have factory steering wheel buttons and then use the transformer and you can have your paddles working through that. So 3 options, no excuses, paddle shift, all the LX dodges. Now, obviously I still have a mess to clean up, but I want to get this video out, so I'm not going to take the time to do it right now. Tidy up all the wiring, do my clock spring, the steering wheel harness plug conversion. But I did want to make one more note. If after you get this all done and you reset the steering angle sensor and you drive it and maybe that light comes back, you want to fiddle with the steering column just like I showed you. So basically, like I showed you, you do the T30, loosen it, pull the steering column towards you, and then tighten it. And if you still get the light after doing left turns, what you want to do is loosen that screw again and just pull on the left side of the steering column and then retighten it. And that should solve the ABS light popping on. So, all right, just like the other ones, if you're interested in one of these, DM me on Instagram or message me on Facebook. That's the only way I'm selling these right now, just so I can communicate with you guys, make sure you're getting the right product and you understand how it works. And then that way you have a direct line communication with me. Once you get the stuff and you install it and you have questions, you can just message me on our messages that we already have. So also, I launched a website. It just has all the information here and links to my videos. So if you want to check that out, it's anthonysgarage1.com. Simple as that. It'll have all 3 harness product pages on there, some examples on what Mercedes paddle shifters to use. Eventually I'll start adding more stuff to it, but just for now, that's all I got on it right now. But appreciate all the guys that ordered so far. The response from the community has been awesome, and I really appreciate it. It's cool to see that everybody is excited for it, and the fact that, you know, stuff is still being developed for the 06 to 10 cars, and I just played my little bitty part in that. So appreciate you guys for watching. Thanks for all the support. Also, we're over 1,000 subscribers, so now you have an option to become like a member or a super fan or something like that. It's like a few bucks a month if you want, basically if you want to see the videos before everybody else. You have that option. Obviously, you don't need to. All I care about is if you guys watch the videos, but I'll check you on the next one.